Welcome to Lifting Leaders Podcast, where we are unleashing leader possibilities to make a better world. I'm Crystal Roberts, and together with Trisha Ryan, we're diving deeper into some of the complexities of the world's most critical challenges and exploring innovative ways of navigating through them.
Through interviews with experts and leaders just like you, we're exploring what it takes to thrive as a leader today and examining new ways of thinking about how to creatively lead into a more equitable, socially responsible, and sustainable future. And the future starts now.
Hi, Trisha. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Crystal, how about yourself?
Good. I'm really glad that we avoided the, grapefruit-sized hail?
I couldn't believe it. I was waiting. I left work early just in case because I thought I'd like to have my car stay intact for a while. It never happened.
I am really excited because today we have a really special guest with us.
Yes.
And one of the things that we're doing this year, as our Lifting Leaders podcast listeners know, is bringing more practicing formal leaders on the show as guests to share their stories about what works, how they have overcome challenges, and what keeps them energized and passionate about making positive change. Mm-hmm. We love our experts and we love our authors, and we're hoping that stories from the sort of front line will help inspire our leaders to keep doing the good work that they're already doing as leaders. And we want you to know that you're not alone out there, that there are fellow travelers on the journey.
This is that Leaders Thrive in 25, right?
That's right. Yep. And we hope that you also gain some new ideas and maybe challenge some old ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And to that end, our guest today has over 35 years of experience in the technology sector, holding numerous executive, board, and advisory roles within B2B and B2C enterprises, including Redbox, Coinstar, Mod Pizza. I love Mod Pizza. TrueBlue, Tealium, and TIBCO software. She has frequently been sought after for her expertise in organizational, strategic, and digital transformation initiatives. She is a self-proclaimed change junkie and possesses substantial experience in driving innovation and introducing new products and services to the market.
Oh, this makes my heart happy.
Yeah. So welcome, Carole McCluskey. How are you today? Thank you for being here.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Great. Anything that you want to say to our listeners before we jump in?
No, just I'm excited to have a conversation with the two of you. And I know that probably everybody isn't watching this, they're listening to it, but I have to say I'm having a moment from watching Saturday Night Live and seeing the skits with the NPR ladies talking, and the two of you look exactly like that to me right now. So it's talk about
we fashioned ourselves after that, of course. You know,
I'm not sure.
Great icebreaker.
Yeah. Is that a good thing? I don't know what just happened there.
Hey, I like Saturday Night Live, okay?
Yeah. Okay. Anything, Trisha, that you want to say?
I'm just thrilled that you're here. We're both organizational effectiveness practitioners and have been leaders ourselves, and we love talking to other people who have a real good handle on that and who love change. It's always a great topic to talk about, so welcome. We're really glad you're here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And on a personal note, I've gotten to know you just a tiny bit, which has been fun, but you are a mutual friend of ours, Melanie Vargas. So we'll give a little shout out to Melanie for bringing you to the podcast. And
one of our former guests.
Yeah, she's actually been on the show
soon
too.
To be another guest again.
Yeah. But it is a rarity, I think, when we actually meet somebody who loves change.
Yes.
And so really looking forward to this interview with you. So tell us your story, and you can answer this any way you like.
Well, I like to say that I'm an accidental success story. So, like a lot of kids growing up in the 70s and, coming out into the world in the 80s, I don't think I had a lot of structure. Like there wasn't a lot of expectation around me, what I was going to be when I grew up. And so I ended up finally getting a degree and starting into the work world without really a big idea of like where I would be when I was 62, like I am today. But I was fortunate enough to get to work on what I call the sell side of technology early. I worked for a CAD/CAM software company. Mm-hmm. This is in the mid 80s, before cell phones, before the internet. before all of that. And I got a job with this great little scrappy software company in Camarillo, California. And I was an applications engineer for them. And what that meant was I did everything. I wrote code. Wow. I wired circuit boards. I made cabling, and I went out into the world and I made sure that our customers could implement the software that they were buying from us. And so because there wasn't an internet and because there wasn't, a really great way to communicate with the home office, I had to be super prepared when I went out to see my customers. And I had to use the old Thomas guide to get where I was going, and flying out into some little town in the Midwest from California. And I learned what I call situational fluency. So I learned how to be scrappy and figure out what was going to happen long before it was going to happen and be able to respond to things that I didn't know were going to happen. But I learned that. And I also learned how to work with customers and how to solve big problems and work with difficult people as well. And through that, I learned that I really liked that kind of experience. And so I worked for a number of companies doing that kind of work, going out and implementing software and making our customers happy and learning how to create value around those investments. And through that, I progressed as a leader and somebody who could lead projects and lead people in those projects. And eventually, I became a vice president, leader of professional services organizations. And that was a great part of my career. And then I actually ended up being an interim executive after that. So I went and I helped companies figure out how do they go to market, their post-sales experience. And through that, I actually got introduced to a client that ended up being a real big change in my life. So I got introduced to Coinstar just as they were beginning their acquisition of Redbox, and got brought in to do a bunch of various projects around integration of their technology organizations. And they eventually asked me to be their head of technology. And at the time I thought, well, I'm not a CTO or a CIO, but had been in technology all my life. And I thought, well, when am I ever going to have an experience like that again? And so I ended up taking the job, and it was really life-changing for me. It was where I became a C-level executive for the first time, really got to run strategy and big picture, $2 billion, almost $3 billion company. And it was just an amazing experience that taught me that I could lead a technology organization and be on the buy side of technology and use that technology I was purchasing to make my company and the company's experience better. And so from that, the last 15 years of my career had been on the, essentially that part of the technology curve, and it was just a really great experience. So
wow. That's quite a story, actually. That's cool. I love that you're on the front end of, basically on the front end of everything before the internet. I worked at that time in California myself, but I remember we used to just wish for things like that. And then when we got it, we didn't know what to do with it. So this is good.
It's kind of crazy because back then, technology was new. It wasn't ubiquitous like it is today, where people who are growing up today, especially in the last 15, 20 years, they're digital natives, right? They literally almost are born with a computer or an iPhone or some type of digital device in their hand. And their expectations of technology are so different than they were in the 80s, when not everybody had a computer at home yet. There was no internet. We were starting to have AOL. I think AOL came out in the late 80s, 88, 89, something like that. So when you wanted to even have that kind of experience, you were dialing up on a modem, and it was slow, and it was just a completely different experience than what we have today. And now people just expect that I turn something on, it's going to work. I should know how to use it. It should be easy. And that experience is not what everybody has. It's certainly not in their work environment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It is so interesting. I was thinking about that whole aspect of usability, like knowing how to actually utilize the technology, and how that shift happened between big, thick manuals and it was, then you had to go online and you had to look it up. And now it's like watch a 30-second YouTube video. It's like the progression of your learning. Like, how do I learn to actually make this change, right?
Well, and
it's totally shifted.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You think about some of the toys that they implemented or brought out into the world in the 90s to get babies and children on board with, like, the computer. Leapfrog used to put out these really things like little 2-year-olds were already playing video games on Leapfrog. Looks like an iPad almost. And I used to think that was so wild, but now I understand that it was almost necessary, in order to get kids ready if they were planning on the internet and everything we do now to be something that was almost intuitive. You almost had to do that. It's interesting. It's very... I don't want to think about it too much, because if I do, then I start getting into my deep dive that we'll never get out of. But
it's so interesting that you got to see that evolution. Yeah. So when you think about change,
awesome,
so much change.
Yeah, I used to be the person that
when
I'd go home or I'd go to a friend's house back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and when I was there, I spent 2 or 3 hours at their house fixing their computer, getting their Windows update or whatever, because I was like, oh, Carole's here. She can fix that for us. And now, it's like, your 5-year-old can fix it.
Right. You're better off with
back in DOS days, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have been a leader for many years. You just admitted that, and you've had many accolades. What's been the most satisfying part of being a leader for you?
I'm not going to say I'm egoless, in the sense that it hasn't been great to have some success for myself. But for me, being a leader really means you don't do things anymore. Your success comes from other people. And I am so proud now, when I go on LinkedIn or I get a call from somebody that worked for me through my career, and I see their success. I see these people who are now CIOs, CEOs, their success, and that I had some small part in that is probably for me the most, significant thing. It actually gives me goosebumps. I'll tell you a little story. So my wife and I, in 2023, we did 2 epic bicycling trips. We rode our bikes from California to Florida, what's called the Southern Tier. And then, because we really like to punish ourselves as much as possible, we rode our bikes from Canada to Mexico the same year.
Oh, my word.
And on the second trip, the Pacific Coast trip, a person that worked for me had said she was really interested in getting a new job, and I had heard about an opportunity, and I put her in for this opportunity and didn't know where it was going to go. And so about 10 days before our cycling trip was up, we're in Pismo Beach, California, and I get a text from this woman, and she says, I got the job. And this is a very important job, and really kind of elevated her career in a way that I always knew she could do. And it came through on this trip, and I had just ridden my bicycle like 1,500 miles, and that was nothing compared to the euphoria that I felt hearing this message. I literally started to cry, and I was yelling and pumping my arms. And Christine, my wife, she says, well, what's going on? I go, well, she got the job. And we were both, she knows her as well, and so we were both just so excited. But those moments, and I've had a lot of those moments in my life, those moments are just like, they're just unbelievable.
Yeah,
wow.
I love them.
Those are the kinds of stories that I love to hear about leadership. I think often leaders, at least a lot of the leaders that I know, are a little reluctant to be that vulnerable. And I love that when they are, because, and what you just did is showing people that, that's really what matters sometimes, is just watching other people grow, and watching them succeed. It's not the be all and end all, but isn't it lovely? Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing.
I also think you kind of mentioned that this was maybe a bigger leap for this person than they might have imagined for themselves.
That's wild. That's cool.
And it's such a beautiful role that we can play as leaders and as mentors to vision that for somebody, to show them that they actually can do more than what they even think they can for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, and that's a part about being a leader, a true leader, right? Not just a manager, not just somebody who's, trying to like see a program or a project from one point to the other, or manage a budget or what have you. It's to truly apply the practice of helping people within your organization succeed. And that success is, shared success, because we all are going to benefit from it, but it's also just really being invested in seeing people develop and have that success personally and what that brings to them, and to be able to have the joy of seeing that transpire is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So what has been challenging? I know you've had challenges.
Yeah. I think challenges come from different things. I think as a leader, challenges often come in how you provide the best environment possible for the people in your organization. I think that can be that sometimes people are overworked and we need to hire more people, but because the company doesn't want to create more budget, you have to ask people to do more than maybe they feel like they can or should, and how to motivate during those times. That can be really challenging. Kind of carrying the party line, but also trying to motivate people underneath that a little bit. That can be really hard. I think the other is, not everybody's great at what they do. And sometimes being a leader means helping people see that maybe they're in the wrong job, or maybe they're not towing the line the way that they need to, and how to do really good, constructive, and loving performance management. I think those are the hard things as a leader.
Yeah. I think helping somebody to understand what the organizational story is and why it's important that they carry that forward. Yeah, that's really tough. And I loved that you said loving performance feedback. It's just, we know that usually when we have those tough conversations with people, they already know it. Most of them do, and they're really unhappy. And when we allow them to just continue to sort of suffer in place, it erodes their own confidence and their abilities. And it is the most loving thing that we can do, is to give them that feedback and to help them figure out what's a better place for them to be. Even though it can be a hard situation for a little while for them, ultimately, they're much better off. Yeah. I think
it's interesting because there are so many leaders who are reluctant to actually do that. They're okay with giving the feedback, but I think they're a little uncomfortable because they're not quite sure, what steps to take to help somebody discover perhaps some other way of being effective or being able to add value. It's a challenge, I think, in every industry, and it's a leader's challenge for sure.
Yeah, if we can manage our own discomfort around that as leaders, in the end, it's really better for them to move them into something different.
I think also it's okay to, as the leader who needs to give that feedback, to be aware enough with your own self to realize that these are the conversations that you don't enjoy. Really, sometimes they can. It's okay to be nervous about a conversation like that, because it is hard to talk about. And so, if you come into a conversation like that and you show some vulnerability in that moment, that actually is kind. You don't have to come in like you're in a suit of armor and this was really easy for me and I'm going to make this, all business, to come in and really express that, your hopes for this person are such that you want them to be happy and productive, and you see then some opportunities where maybe we can make that better, but also maybe you're at a point where you can't, and you've tried, and that this is where we're at, and it's hard for both of you. And there's all sorts of legalese and other things that go around some of those types of conversations. But I think vulnerability, if you come across it with empathy and vulnerability in a positive, professional way, it's really, it can be very powerful. And people have come back to me later in life after we've had some of these conversations and said, that was a real pivotal moment for me, and I appreciate that because I wasn't in the right job, or I knew I was struggling and I needed to move, or I needed that change. I needed that conversation.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes for people who will come back and say that, who have processed through it and actually come out on the other side better, right? That's wonderful. So how has your leadership helped to make a better world? You've already sort of said part of that, but give us a little more.
I think making it a better world, it's one person, one moment, right? We can only do what we can. I again, kind of going back to looking at the world at the Carole McCluskey ecosystem, the people and companies and situations that I've been fortunate to be in and around. I think that hopefully people have learned really good things from me about caring for their fellow employees and for the people who work for them and for their business partners and such, and that I've set an example of how you can love people at work, how you can be kind and really always be looking out and having a humanistic approach. And I think that people who've worked for me, I see that in not all of them, but I see that in many of them. And I hope that what I've done has been able to give people permission to have that type of human, just kind. You can be kind and be a leader.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can be tough and be kind. And that has translated into more of that in the workplace and making that, better for companies and people that are surrounded by that.
It's a beautiful shadow to cast, if you will. If people look up for that point of reference, if they aspire to be leaders, often they're looking at their leaders, right, or their leaders' leaders. So, describing the way you described it, that's a wonderful model for people to be able to have as their point of reference when they are looking to be an effective leader. That's great.
I also think that a lot of times leaders, especially at the executive level, sometimes don't recognize the impact that they do have. So creating that culture, even in just your own group, around humanistic leadership, treating people with kindness, sets the expectation. That's kind of what you're saying, Tricia. It sets the expectation for everybody else in your group. And that can be hundreds of people. And then people look across and they see that. And it's inspiring. It's like one person leads to another person.
It's how culture, gets kind of comes together, isn't it? It's like a lot of businesses, most businesses have microcultures because certain departments will be, you'll have one department that's sort of running the way you've run your department. And then there are the other departments where things are a little more chaotic. But I love the idea of looking across and saying, what are they doing differently that we could be doing? And that's how you start building a more healthy culture.
Yeah. Because we know that treating people like that leads to better outcomes, right? Better productivity, better retention, all these kind of things. And so there's a real business reason to do it too. It's good practice. It's being a good human, but it's also good for the business. So we all get lots of advice about how to be a leader, and we're giving advice today.
Because that's what we do.
So what is the best or worst advice that you've received from someone else along your journey here? And how did that help shape you into the leader you are today?
So I've worked for a lot of really bad leaders, or companies that had bad leadership. And so I learned a lot of what I didn't want to do and didn't want to model in those. And I won't give really specific examples of that. I think we all have experienced that. But I'll tell a little story. This was in the early 90s. I was not a manager. I worked for a software company in Bellevue, Washington. And I had this really great manager. His name was Fred. And Fred was just one of the most, he was a very kind person. He was very thoughtful. And he actually gave me, it was an internal transfer to get my job working for him. And I wasn't really probably the best candidate, but he liked me and he saw potential in me, which was really great. And I ended up doing really well in the job, and he taught me a lot. But one of the things that he taught me about leadership, and this goes back to being kind and thinking about how you want to come across and what you want to instill in others around you. He told me this story of his daughter and his wife coming to see him at work. Mm. And so he's sitting in his office, and his wife and daughter come into his office, and his daughter says, "Daddy, is this where you live?"
Oh, wow. Wow.
And yes, so think about that feeling, that like, wow, gut punch, right? Oh, I'm not home. I'm not very present. All the things that could mean. And so it changed his life. He made a decision right then and there that he was going to try really hard to, set some boundaries and be home more and be more present when he was home. And that incident happened probably two or 3 years before I met Fred. So by the time I met Fred and he tells me this story, I could see that Fred was a really great manager. He asked how his people were doing, but he also set some boundaries. And I wasn't at a point in my career yet where I understood that fully. I was still very much like, I would go home at 10 o'clock at night and I would do things like that. Yeah. But that was, I was in my early 30s at that point. But as I have progressed as a leader, one of the things that I realize is that the example that I set, the way I present myself, how I come to work, what I do when I'm there, and what I do when I'm not there, has a huge impact on the people that work for me and my home life. And so what I realize is that when I take a vacation. When I'm home, be home.
Yeah.
Not that there aren't exceptions to that, and we all have that, but learning how to be very present in the moment and demonstrate how to allow for all these other things and show it and live it every day really sets the tone for the organization. And it also does a lot in terms of how you develop your team to be what they should be. I mean, I always tell people, I'm the laziest manager you'll ever have. And when I'm not lazy, it means you're not doing your job, right? Like, so if I'm doing your job, who's doing mine, kind of thing. And so when I go on vacation, it's the perfect opportunity for everyone in my organization to step up.
Yeah.
To realize that they don't actually need me to do their job. My job is really to just clear the way. Mm-hmm. But going back to how Fred kind of told me that story in 1994, right? It really has come home in different ways throughout my life in terms of how to be the best I can be in the moment, and that people are looking at you all the time, and to be aware of that.
Yeah. You don't even know, right? That's part of that. You don't even know the impact that you're having on people. Yeah.
And there's nothing more impactful than having a family member bring that to your attention, especially a child, right? Oh, my word.
Yeah. Daddy, is this where you live?
Oh, my gosh.
So I have a multi-part question here for you. And that is, from your experience, what do you think are the most important competencies for leaders today? And what do they need to be really good at? And I'll ask you the other part in a minute.
So it kind of, I think I hit on this a little bit before around performance management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think before the performance management, it's being able to evaluate talent. Mm-hmm. Being able to really understand what it is you're hiring for, what you're building, and how to incorporate that into how you hire. And that it's not a cloning environment. If I hired all the people that I hired that were just like me, we'd get nothing done.
Right.
We'd talk all the time about it. have big ideas, and nobody would want to project manage it.
Yeah.
It would be terrible, right? So to understand how to build a team that it enhances your skill set as a leader and really creates an environment of diverse thought and skill. So that's really important. And being able to, so in the interview process and in that evaluation, to really hire well, that's one thing I think is really important. And then being able to give that direct feedback on a regular basis, so that you're always building on what your expectations are and communicating. And then I think being able to partner really well beyond your own world, especially in a shared service leadership role like I've had, where you're the CIO or CTO of a company. You've got a finance business partner and an HR business partner. You've got line of businesses that are dependent on you. And I think being able to really understand the relationships that you need to have as an executive and partnership, and I think that's a real important thing to be able to do. And then understanding what creates value for your customers, if you have internal customers or external customers, and then being able to translate that into how you build the right goals and processes within your organization to align with that.
Yeah.
I think those are really important things. And then I think finally it's that followership. People always use the word leadership.
Yeah.
For me, it's just as important to really develop followership. People who want to work for you, who want to bring more people to that organization because of what you and the rest of the team are creating, is super important.
I love this, and actually, you're listing things that I think are really very important too. In my view, in my world, that's important as well. And I'm thinking, some of them are not as easily won. Some of them are something you could learn. You could go to a class, you could probably learn something about, delegation, or you could learn about giving feedback, right? But when it comes to like recognizing talent and taking a look at strategy and seeing who might be your best player, that kind of thing, that's not as easily taught. So, what are some ideas, or maybe one or two ideas you might have for how a person could, maybe not a checklist or anything, but how a person could build those kind of competencies?
I think, again, getting to a point where you're an executive leader takes time. And that building of those competencies comes through a couple of things. One is experience, credibility in that experience, developing a skill set that gives you I'll use the word right in quotation marks, the right to hold the leadership position in that space. And then the other is the learned management and leadership skills that you gain through that. And some of that comes through trial and error, right? Working with and for leaders that you admire and leaders that you don't. Seeking out opportunities to develop skills. That doesn't come, easily. You don't go to a management class and become a good leader, because there's an application that has to be there. But I think it really just comes through practicality. Nothing comes easy. These don't come easy. I mean, there are some people who, have the great fortune of starting a company and being a founder and being with that company forever and leading it and being very successful. But those are very rare situations. Most people, grow into a leadership role through trial and error and experience. But I think seeking out people who you admire and asking them and trying to model after that. And again, working for people that you don't admire or are challenged by, those are great lessons, because you learn how to work with difficult people, you learn how to understand people's differences and things, but it really just, I think, comes through what you want to model and really aspiring for that and not being afraid to be a leader. Being a leader can be very scary, but being really honored by it.
Yeah. I think that's a great perspective to really be honored by that, and to give that role the sort of reverence that it's due. Yeah. This one's kind of a tough one. There's a lot of division in our country and world today, and we see this showing up in our organizations. From your experience, how do you get people to work effectively together while honoring differences? We expect you to have the answer for everyone.
We're all going to follow you from now on.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that, there's DEI has got a kind of it's a dirty word today and stuff. But really, when you pull it all apart and you really think about what I think everybody wants, regardless of what your political situation is or anything else, I think really at the end of the day, people just want to be respected for what they do and who they are and how they come to work every day. And that means a lot of differences. And the fact is that you cannot be a successful leader and treat everybody as a one-size-fits-all. It doesn't work that way. Everyone has a quirk or something unique about them. And I think that the biggest thing we can do is we can always find the common denominator through everybody, regardless of their belief system. So I think you seek that out. You seek out what people want to do, what success looks like, and you focus on that. And you treat people as individuals with the most respect you can, whether you believe who they voted for president or what religion they are. That's really not critical to how I get my work done. What is critical is that we work as a team and that we have respect. And if you do those things, I think you can get through most situations.
Yeah.
I want to do a loop of what you just said and just crank up the volume a little bit and play it on social media constantly. Oh, my word.
Respect. Yes.
Yeah. You are a self-described change junkie. I love that. Why do you love change so much when others tend to fear it? And how can you help our listeners move more in this direction, seeking and embracing change?
I don't know. I mean, I think, I love change. I love to go. Also, I like to travel. I like to do new things. I like to meet new people. When I first started working in the mid-'80s, this was a time when everybody went to work for a job and they stayed there for 25, 30, 40, 50 years, including my father. I, being a woman in technology, saw very quickly that I was not going to be the CEO of a company if I stayed the exact same place in the same company I joined when I first graduated from college. And so I realized very quickly that the only way I was going to get to the next level was to go to a different company, get more money, get a different position, and to advance that way. And that path that I took created a resilience and actually an anticipation for what was next. And I really loved it. And yes, it scared the crap out of my father. He'd be like, "What? You got another job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm making more money. I got a better position. I'm doing more stuff. It's awesome." And he would just freak out. And so that really kind of was the way that I got to where I'm at. Had I not been embracing the opportunity for change, I would not be where I'm at today. And I know that. But I also realize a lot of people don't like change. And but change happens to them often, and they really don't manage it very well. So one of the things that I realize is that change, it's kind of going back to how do you get people to get along and all these other things. It really all comes down to communication and understanding that each person might need something different in a changing environment. They might need to know more about what's making the change, what everybody's going to be doing, where they're going to sit, when their break time might be. I mean, it could be very, very specific things that individual needs. And so as a leader, helping people through that, meeting them where they're at and giving them as much or as little as they might need during that process, but understanding it's not just one email that goes out and then everybody's going to be good. There's a process and a change management process and a communication process and all of that. And some of it is I've realized that as I've gotten through my career, a lot of times I'm a therapist, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of emotional massaging that's going on in terms of helping people through these situations.
Yeah. And that's how we would describe the difference between change and transition. And all that like processing of emotion and helping people understand what does it actually mean for them individually. How do they thrive in that?
How do they get it right in their head and their heart, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
So the last part of that question, or another question with it, is if you had to put your change philosophy into like one line.
A one-liner.
Yeah, what would that be?
That's super easy, actually, because I say it to people all the time. Comfort doesn't mean growth.
Love that.
And you know where I got that? From
Where?
a Ziggy cartoon, like back in 1988 or 89. And I carried it on a little strip of paper in my briefcase.
Yeah.
For years.
Back in the day.
Yes, for years. And I use it all the time. And it's so true. If you want to be comfortable, be comfortable. It's all good. But accept the fact that comfort comes with a price.
Words of wisdom from Ziggy. Love it.
Yes.
Love it. So our focus this year is on thriving. So leaders thrive in 25. What are you doing? What practices do you have to personally thrive this year?
I like to say that I thrive most of the time, and I've been in that mindset for a number of years. And I have a motto. There's actually behind my head. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little sign that says "Do epic shit."
Oh,
And that's how I live my life. Everything in my business, my consulting firm is called Epic for Life. I thrive by doing epic things, and those epic things are riding my bicycle across the country, right? Working with really cool companies that I want to help as an advisor or a board member. I have the luxury of setting my own schedule because I don't work full time anymore. I'm mostly an advisor now, but mental health and physical health are my number one thing. Awesome. And by focusing on that, it just gives me the energy and the enthusiasm and the strength to do the things that I want to do, whether it's in my life or it's in my business.
Great.
So what have we not asked you that you would like to address today?
Is there anything that you still want to share?
Yeah, what
that
do
we
you
haven't
hoping
asked
our
about?
listeners know about you or about what you're talking about?
No, I think we've covered a lot of really fun things, as you can tell. If I were to boil, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, it says who I am, and it says I'm a professional soother. And I get...
You have to say that one more time. A professional...
A professional soother.
Oh, professional soother. Okay.
And it's on my LinkedIn headline. And it's been there forever since I've been on LinkedIn. And it comes down to... I used to go to parties, cocktails, things, whatever, like just a social event. This is back in, 30 years ago, probably 20 something years ago. Now I realize how old. When I talk about things like this, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so old. But people would say, what do you do for a living? And this is back when I did a lot of the implementation side of work. And I would say, and I realized trying to explain, this is back when computers and things were not really popular in the common world. And then finally I was to say, I'm a professional soother. And they would say, what? And I'd say, yeah, well, I solve problems. I make customers happy. I solve problems. I work through big things. And then I realized that as I've gotten through my career and became a executive and such, so much of what you do, if you do it well, you are a professional soother. Yeah. You're solving problems. You're making the world and your work life better and easier, and you're solving problems, and so I'm a professional soother.
It's way more interesting and important than that cocktail party chat, right? I mean, you started out that way, but look, it's really true, right? I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, true. Anyway.
I was thinking we should take that on when people
Yeah.
organizational development. People always like look at you cross-eyed, like, "What in the world is organizational development?"
And for
that's a lot
goodness
of
sake,
what we are too.
don't say OD. They're going to go, what? You work with OD?
We help people
overdose?
calmly move through change, right?
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So looking forward, what are you excited about? And I'm sure since you said you're about Epic, what is Epic? What's next for you?
Well, so I do have another epic bicycle trip. We're going to do the Atlantic coast from Bar Harbor, Maine to Key West, Florida, hopefully in the fall.
Oh, beautiful.
And so, because we eventually want to go do all 4 sides of the United States, and we've done 2. We want to do the other 2. And then, I'm working with some really cool companies right now as an advisor and board member, and I'm really hoping that professionally I can get another board position this year. I've been talking to a couple of companies, and it's something I truly love doing, and so I'm hoping that's going to happen. So I'd be really excited if I can make that happen. And if I don't, I've got a full plate already, and I've got plenty to do and to think about. But I'd love to get another board position this year.
Sounds exciting, actually,
Yeah, you've heard it here first.
Yeah.
So give us just a tiny bit more detail about what that would look like. What's the company that would be like
the type
the
of
sweet
company,
spot for you?
So I typically work with companies that are in that sort of late stage tech company. It hasn't gone public yet. Maybe around 100 million in revenue, and they're really at that inflection point of moving to more scalable processes. They're thinking more seriously about, their go-to-market strategies and some of the challenges they have with scale, both organizationally and process-wise. And as a board member, I bring in a lot of thinking around that and partnering with some of the leadership team. And I try to be a very active board member. I'm not a come once a quarter and listen to the spiel and leave. I really try and get involved with the company and add value outside of the boardroom.
Yeah. Well, we have heard such fabulous things about you. And so whoever lands you is going to be super lucky. So wonderful. Love that. All right. Thank you so much. We are at the end of our questions. Appreciate you taking the time.
This was a gift.
To talk with us. And I know that our listeners will walk away inspired with some new ideas and a great model. Not one of the models where you say, I don't want to be like that person. We don't want them to be inspired that way, but inspired by somebody who really walks the talk. So,
and you effectively soothed the whole time.
Yeah.
It was great.
That's really good. Well, I had a really good time, so thanks for having me on.
Oh, we're so happy that you were here.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
So wasn't that excellent?
I loved it.
I did too.
I loved the legacy that she's leaving for so many people and how she's touched so many lives to help them develop as leaders and take leadership roles, and in a way that we would say is a model way.
Yes,
right? That
absolutely.
we want people to lead. Yeah.
Yeah, she touched on points that we always want to hear,
Yeah.
but we don't often say. And
Yeah.
it was lovely. It was great. I felt like I could almost see the roadmap, to get to, that kind of leadership style, the kindness and empathy and
And toughness.
And exactly.
Yeah. And courage.
And the courage part, not just courageous with people who work with her and for her, but her journey to get to where she is, but with curiosity and with that love of change. I mean, that probably was the best fuel for getting her where she is now,
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. It's lovely. So let's keep that conversation going. If you have questions or comments about the show, you can find us on all our social media channels at lifting_leaders. We have so many exceptional podcast episodes coming up with more fantastic guests like Carole. So be sure to subscribe to our podcast just about everywhere. Apple Podcast, YouTube, you name it, we've got it, right?
That's right. We're on a lot more platforms now that we've changed. So if you're hearing this episode, you found us.
Yay!
Congratulations. We're so happy to see these numbers coming back up.
Yes.
We know that our listeners on the old platform are now finding us on the new platform.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate it.
Lifting Leaders Podcast. You need all 3 words.
Yes. So if you know somebody who would find this episode inspiring, share it with them. Text them, email them, or take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram or tag us at lifting_leaders. If you'd like to know more about us, our guests, or the show, please go to our website at liftingleaderspodcast.com. You'll find the show notes there as well. If you're looking for help in developing your leaders or would like a growth opportunity yourself through leader coaching, please contact us through our website at www.liftingleaderspodcast.com. Thank you to Ari Chance Roberts for his technical support of our show. Finally, please take 30 seconds and follow us, especially now that we're on the new platform. If you are able to hear this, you're on the new platform. So go up and hit follow, please. Follow us, and it'll help you because you won't miss an episode any longer. And it'll help us because you won't miss an episode any longer.
Yeah, every Monday.
Yeah. So to follow us, go to Lifting Leaders Podcast Show on all the places, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Then just tap on the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you'll be willing to give us a 5-star rating and a review and share the episode with a friend, we would be most grateful. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for bringing Carole to us. This was an awesome interview, I thought.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Many thanks to you, our listeners. We are so happy to have you with us, and we really appreciate you. Find ways every day to lift each other up. Take care.
Bye.